Aloha everyone, I'm Jason Danielak, Program Director at the Pacific Academy of Building Design. I'm really excited to welcome you to the first conversation in our series on architects who've taken a unique, interesting, non-traditional path in architecture. This is a topic that's deeply personal to me. I didn't follow the typical route into architecture either. I came back to it later in life through historic preservation, hands-on work, and a whole lot of persistence. That winding journey is exactly why I'm passionate about creating more flexible, inclusive paths in this field. Today, I'm honored to kick off this series with someone whose story truly reflects this idea that great architects don't always follow a straight line. Joseph Ferraro, FAIA, Lead AP, is the co-founder of Ferraro Choi and Associates, a leading architecture, interior design, and research firm specializing in environmentally sensitive design. Joe earned his BFA from Pratt Institute and didn't take a traditional BArch-MArch route. He studied architecture at the University of Hawaii while building his practice and experience, ultimately becoming a fellow of the American Institute of Architects for his pioneering work in sustainable and remote region design. That kind of persistence and vision is exactly what we're here to celebrate. Joe, thank you so much for being here. Let's start at the beginning. And let's talk about what first sparked your interest in architecture and how your journey began.
I grew up in upstate New York, city of Albany, actually, and I came from an entrepreneurial family. My great-grandfather had a manufacturing company that manufactured saws and shipped them throughout the United States. And then my grandfather was a mason contractor who came from Italy in 1914. And my father started working for him when he was a youth. And then after he left home and started his own company, he started his own construction company, General Construction. But he also owned a lumber company and an aircraft company, repairing airplanes and building experimental aircraft. So I grew up learning a lot from my father and grandfather, and I guess just acquiring an entrepreneurial spirit. And in, 1967, I graduated from high school and went to New York and entered Pratt Institute. Actually, I wanted to be an architect, and my father wanted me to be an architect. Um, but I did not take calculus in my senior year. And at the time, if you didn't take calculus, the guidance counselor said, well, you can't be an architect. So a bit frustrated, I went into Pratt to the art school and got a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Interior Design. And in my fourth year of that, I went into the School of Urban Planning at Pratt. And my thesis for graduation was a block in the Lower East Side, Henry Street, rehabbing old law and new law tenant apartments and creating a Vest Pocket Park. And with another architectural student, we also designed new housing in the same block. So that got me very interested in architecture. Graduated from Pratt. The hiring climate at the time, 1971, was pretty bad. I wound up with a few different jobs. I worked for a architectural woodworker for 3 years. I learned a lot about architectural hardware, lumber. We worked on many projects throughout New York City. So I learned a lot about throughout New York City and the Eastern Seaboard, different projects. And after about 3 years of that, went to work for a small architectural firm in residential work. And then after that, I did some freelance work, designing studios for fashion photographers, notably at Carnegie Hall. And after that, I got a job at Sheridan Associates, which was a firm that was originally called Raymond Loewy International, which was a international industrial design firm. They also did interiors. So I did interiors there, as well as industrial design. This is when the cash machines were first coming out. So I designed cash machines, a baby's incubator, but also some interiors. I did work at NYU and down by the World Trade Center at Bankers Trust. I did that for 6 years, and then I was going to go to Alaska. I had a private pilot's license, so I was going to go to Alaska, work up there, and be able to fly. But I took a vacation in Hawaii. I was amazed at what I found out here, and I got 3 job offers, and I decided to work for the CJS Group Architects. And that got me started on designing here in a tropical environment. I went back to school at the same time I was working full time to UH School of Architecture. Let's see, I worked at CJS Group for 6 years and then started our own firm in 1988, Ferraro Choi and Associates. So in 86, I sat for my license and got my license to practice architecture here and subsequently in New York.
So did you finish your master's at UH?
No, I didn't. I completed almost all my work except for the studio courses. The dean, Elmer Botzai, kept encouraging me to get my license and get the hell out of there. He said, "You can teach here, for God's sakes. What are you doing here?" I really wanted to get my degree. I finished my thesis, handed that in, but then the opportunity came to start this firm, and I felt I just couldn't do both. Reluctantly, I gave up the degree and started the firm.
And how many days since then have you used the calculus you never took?
I did take it, finally.
Oh, you did finally take it. How often have you used it?
Yeah, I took it while I was going to UH.
Okay.
But that is funny because I've never used calculus. And I've asked several other architects. One architect told me he used it once.
I'm trying to think if I ever did for any weird shape. Everyone says, "Oh, you must have been good at math." I was good at math, but I don't use that. Also, being good at math doesn't add feet and inches together.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've used geometry, I've used basic math, but definitely not calculus.
Yep. That's actually interesting to me how you were at UH and then proceeded to get your license without finishing, because I had a similar type of return to getting my MArch and leaving an MArch program and just going and working, and then ultimately getting my license because I got tired of explaining who I was at the table. So saying I'm the architect on the project was so much easier.
Yeah, and I had enough years of experience to take the exam. So I took it, passed it, and moved on.
Mm-hmm. The exams are not what you learn. Well, they are a little bit what you learned in school, but they're more what we're doing in practice and what the right way is to do everything. So a lot of that experience is more important than even what you learned in school. I don't think 90% of what assignments I was doing when I was in my master's program ever related to what I do on a daily basis or the exams. I don't know if you felt that way when you were doing licensing as well, but
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. What I really passed up at UH was all the studio courses. I took everything else, but the studio courses, I just couldn't fit that in with working full time.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt I had enough experience in that. It would be nice to take them, but the entrepreneurial background, I guess, came into play when I started a firm. I remember Gerald and I were working at CJS together, and one day I was doing something at our house, and I said, "Hey, Gerald, can you come over? I want to ask you how to do your opinion on how to do this." He came over, and it was in an afternoon. He said, "Hey, I got an idea. You got a few minutes?" He said, "I'm thinking we should start our own firm." I go, "What?" And he said, "Yeah." And so anyway, we sat there. He said, "Well, what would it take? Let's just do a, what if?" And I said, "Well, it takes, a lot of marketing. We got to bring in work." We started penciling out things. Well, we need some chairs, need a desk. We put a budget together. That afternoon, we also thought, what would a business plan look like? So we put a business plan together. but we did not want to do anything bad for the firm we're with.
Hmm.
We didn't want to steal any clients or anything like that. So one day we went in, told our boss we were leaving, and then a few of the clients just said, "You're the only people we know. We don't know your boss." So they came to us, and we got permission from Chris Smith, the owner of the firm, that we could take them. And then four of the people in the firm said they were resigning and they were going to work for us. And we said, "Wait a minute, we don't have you in our budget." And they said, "Well, that's too bad. We're working for you." So anyway, we figured it out, and it all started working. And the focus was on interior architecture based on the market. And then Gerald went back, got his MBA, and he was the CFO of the firm, and I was the marketing, bring in the work part of the firm. But from the day one, Gerald said, we're no longer architects as much as we are businessmen. We thought that was as important as doing good architectural work.
And that's actually an interesting point that you make there, because myself, I also have my own small firm. I work full time for a small firm. One of the most interesting things I found out just on my journey to that, there's not one right way to be in architecture. There's
Right.
not one job of an architect. We have that Hollywood version of what it is.
Yeah.
And it's so much more and also so much less of that all at the same time, but so many other rewarding avenues you can go down.
Yeah, I think when people say, and when I was a kid too, I want to be an architect, I want to be a designer is what, is the real phrase. But architect seems to be so much more over consuming so many more things, right?
One of the things when I was teaching, both at the School of Architecture and at Chaminade, was to explain that the skill sets that they were learning were not just limited to architectural practice, to conventional architectural practice, and that they could take those skill sets, the problem solving, the critical thinking skill sets, the drawing, and they could apply it to a number of different fields. And that the field, especially now, we're at this kind of crux where the field's going to be changing rapidly within the next decade, that we're going to be able to do things with those skill sets and redefine what an architect is and what the practice of architecture is radically. So I think it would be nice to see students be on the forefront of that and really take the reins and start to define what those expansions could be.
I think the projects that we will do, or the profession will do, and the tools they use will change. But I think our mission, or what defines an architect, will be pretty much the same. What we do is we lead, we organize, and we critically think. I mean, I started out with the parallel rule and lead and ink and those sorts of things. They're bygone now. AutoCAD is gone, BIM is in, and now other things are coming in. But they're all tools.
Mm-hmm.
And the projects have changed radically too. But I think as an architect, still do what I always did.
I want to jump to a little bit after going through your website and hearing stories from Lisa and finding some anecdotal information. I think you might be the only architecture firm that I can think of that has a category in their portfolio called Extreme. And to the best of my knowledge, you were the first to achieve LEED status of buildings in Hawaii. Is that correct?
My partner, Gerald, and I were the first architects to become LEED professionals. And then I think we did some of the first LEED certified projects in the state.
And tell me about this extreme sector of business. The extreme, yeah. Because Lisa and I were talking about it a little bit prior to this, thinking about how similar some of the two of the extremes that you work with are, particularly Hawaii and Antarctica.
Yes. So the extremes, when I was at CJS Group, we had an opportunity to go to Antarctica and do a programming study for a new laboratory for the National Science Foundation. So myself and another architect went down, spent 6 weeks, interviewed 60 scientists, came back, did a program, and then we competed for the project. And the competition was us and a bunch of Alaskan firms. And since there's no tundra in the Antarctic, we knew what we were talking about and they didn't, and we won the job. We finished that project at CJS, started our own firm, and then we were selected to design the Russian station down there. And we gave a proposal, and then the Russian Science Board nixed that, and they selected a German firm, but we were then hired subsequently by some Russian oligarchs who were paying for the station to peer review it with the German firm. So we had that under our belt. And then I think it was 2 years ago, we won an award to do design work up in Greenland, Northern Canada, and Alaska. So it's kind of like, the extremes of our work.
That's cool. So you said something that I just want to touch back on here. You had the experience because there's no tundra in Antarctica, and you were familiar with there being no tundra because working in Hawaii, whereas Alaska and Alaskan firms are dealing with that freeze-thaw cycle more. Can you talk a little bit just more to that about how the Hawaii knowledge helped position you better for that, for something that is not Hawaii-like at all?
Well, actually, it's very Hawaii-like because the location that we're designing this laboratory was on an island called Ross Island, which is volcanic, and it has a 10,440 foot high Mount Erebus. That's an active volcano. It definitely doesn't have tundra, and it never thaws. So by going down there and doing a 6-week programming study, we realized what the situation was. And to make it even more parallel with our work with Hawaii projects, plantation houses were all raised above the surface, right? The buildings we do in Antarctica are raised above the surface because for snowdrifting purposes. So the wind blows under the building, and we have a soffit under the building, create a Venturi effect so that the wind hits the building and blows the snow out from under the building so it doesn't encompass over the top of the building.
You don't realize on the surface these similarities that really do come up for entirely different, but also the same root of the reasons.
Yeah, and the other big challenge is that the National Science Foundation and all the other nations have a Antarctic Treaty Association. And that treaty is to keep the continent pristine so that they can do science. So they just do discovery. Similar, Hawaii, that's why our firm stresses the environment so much in our work. Because if you screw up our environment here, what's the reason for being here, right? I mean, it's a tropical paradise, everyone says, and the major income for the state is tourism. And so you don't want to screw that up either. So, it's another parallel.
People who aren't from or haven't lived in Hawaii look at it very differently than when you're living there with the day in and day out and realizing how delicate a balance it is and what goes into the design of literally anything on one of the islands and how impactful that is. Until I lived there and was doing it every day, I couldn't have an understanding of what that meant. And even disconnected again now, I still don't. Yeah, it's one of those unique things. It almost is like another country in many regards that is isolated within our United States. Playing off of that and Hawaii being unique, one of the things that you do a lot of, much like this interview that you're doing right now, is staying involved in the community. As an architect, and as an architect in Hawaii, Can you share a little bit about how important that is to stay involved in community and active and hearing from the people around you to be able to successfully do your work?
Oh, yeah, sure. If you want to be an architect, you have to understand what you're designing for, who you're designing for. What's the big purpose? Not knowing the culture, not knowing the environment, not knowing the people, that's very awkward. So being plugged into the community is important if you want to be a designer for them. As well as, I mean, if you own a business, if you run a business, it's the way you get work, by being involved, by being on, boards, philanthropy, by, giving back to the community. The more you give, the more you receive, is the old adage, which is true. I've been a Rotarian for as long as I've run our firm. Our firm's 36 years old, and I've been a Rotarian for 35 years. And the motto of Rotarians is service above self. I feel that if we're doing something pro bono, it's as important as if we're doing something, getting paid for it. Our philosophy too is to do things for the public good. So several years ago, we decided the types of projects we would do and the projects we would not do. So our focus is on the community.
Looking at the projects you've worked on, do you have a favorite one that stands out in your mind?
One really small but very important project was the Gateway Center at Nelha, which is on the Big Island in Kona. And that little building won many national awards, won the AIA Code Award, it won the LEED Platinum Award, and it's a small building that was designed for a demonstration for the state on sustainable design. And it also was a laboratory for hydrogen fixation for the island of Hawaii. So this building uses deep sea water from the Nelha laboratories. It's at 42 degrees. We bring it up to the building with a little pump. And then the building is air conditioned without any mechanical equipment, all by using the chimney effect. The roof heats up and pulls air out those chimneys through vents in the ceiling, through vents in the floor, and pulls that hot, humid air over a radiator and drops out about 50 gallons of water, and then air conditions the space without any mechanical equipment. So we've used that philosophy on several other buildings, including the big NOAA campus out on Ford Island. And it's just a really simple way of doing something, using all the resources that you find at that site. And then, of course, the other building, Admonson Scott South Pole Station. So that's at 10,000 feet of ice. And it houses 150 people, 110 below zero Fahrenheit.
Wow.
It's not reachable for 9 months in the winter. The snow never melts there, and we get 8 inches of snow a year. So any building on the surface will get enveloped with snow. So that whole building has to be jackable. It has a shape in the front of it so that when the wind hits it, you get a Venturi effect that it pushes the wind under the building and the drift behind the building.
It's designed to continuously be jacked up and lifted higher as the snow line comes higher. Oh, wow. Okay. Is there a maximum height on it that it was designed to go to, or?
Yeah, it'll go about 45 feet higher.
Wow. And so here comes the math. About how long is that expected to last it? 8 inches a year, 45 feet?
The building's about a 50-year building.
Joe, I'm curious then, with the work that NASA and the private space companies are looking into to develop habitats on the moon. Was that ever something that you decided you wanted to get involved in or not?
We got involved a little bit. The state had a small agency that they're looking at possibly launch facilities here, and then the state. Well, they got that thing over on the Big Island where it's like experiencing being on Mars.
The high seas, simulation.
Yeah. So I was involved in some of that stuff, and then, oh my God, it was years and years ago. I think we did something for Lockheed on some conceptual designs.
Mm-hmm.
But it really, I don't know. I'm too old right now. I've had my fun. I mean, Antarctica is enough to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
But I find it very interesting. I just went to it. I'm a member of the Explorers Club, and we just had a lecture the other night by a UH scientist about life on the moon, which will be a precursor for life on Mars.
One more question on the routine questions here, and then we have a fun one to close up with, which, Lisa, I'm actually going to ask you the fun one too after Joe answers, because it's a good one, and which means I should probably be ready to answer it as well, since this is the first time we're doing it. But the last real question, considering that education is looking different now than it ever has before, especially post-COVID, what advice would you give to someone who is interested in getting into the field of architecture, but isn't sure that the traditional path is for them?
Well, I'd ask them, why do they want to go into architecture? And when I heard their answer, I'd find out what aspects of it that intrigues them. How serious are they about it? Because it is a long haul, and changes, and like I've experienced, changes happen along the way. I think you could have a mix of it. I went back to school when I was in my 30s, and so I would suggest that they get involved in, depending on what aspects they want. Either get involved in construction, which I think is a great way of getting involved, understanding what buildings are about, and then take some courses. And it's also hard, I think, getting a job in the field if you don't have some kind of a formal education. I've seen so many people go into the field and then go out of it. It's a long haul.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all know that.
Here's your final question. You've just been assigned to design a building in a fictional universe. What's the universe? What's the project? And who's it for?
That already actually happened.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Okay. So what was it then?
Hank Rogers. You know Hank Rogers?
I don't
Blue
actually.
Planet. Blue Planet. And he was investing all this money in a fictional planet or something, and with avatars. And he took me out to lunch, and he asked me if I would be interested in designing structures on this imaginary planet with avatars. And I told him he was freaking crazy, and that was it.
So my answer is similar to yours, except I'll share why it's not crazy after Lisa goes.
Okay, well, I'm going to follow along the same vein because Joe's aware of the fact that I did my doctoral research on habitat design for outer space. And I actually started out by looking at the physical structures and thinking about it from, a very conventional architectural perspective, how, we had to deal with the pressure differentials, how do we deal with the site issues, how we use in situ, materials and resources to build. But there was already a lot going on in the area, and I felt what was missing was the human component, how we were actually going to experience and live in those spaces, and how what we designed in space helped human beings adapt to an environment we have no knowledge of. And so that for me has always been the fascinating part, is not the physicality of the structure, but the interface that it provides for humans in their environment. And so that would be for me, that interface is for me the critical thing, whether it's interior design here on Earth or looking about how we design structures to have a more favorable impact on our local environments here. And I just simply translated that same sentiment to a kind of a space venue.
Right on.
That's the piece I feel like a lot of the technology doesn't think about.
Yeah.
When we were talking about that.
Yeah.
And actually, the conclusion I came to in my dissertation was I rejected all of the kind of directions that we're currently taking in space exploration as being highly unsustainable and undesirable. And I developed kind of a new model for the way I think we need to interact in space. And so by exploring those things, it would allow us to have a new perspective of how we could live on here on Earth.
My answer kind of falls right in the middle of both of you, interestingly enough. So I always wanted to be an Imagineer at Disney growing up. And back then, I don't think we knew what they were. None of the stuff existed to know behind the scenes of what they're doing now. But the thing that I found so amazing for me, forget the fantasy worlds, forget all of that. They were creating during my childhood years all of the hotels that they spread across the resort in Florida. And they were recreating spaces that were real, but in a way that we all could experience them. So a lot of the hotels took, whether it was, like Louisiana Bayou, New Orleans architecture, a national parks lodge, all of these were coming together in one place. And what was so fascinating to me was that they had to know so much about the real thing to strip it back to what the important pieces were to make that comfortable for all of us to experience. So yeah, mine was right between the outer space and the real fake planet. Mine was creating the fake Earth on Earth again, I guess. I was curious to see where that question would go. I didn't answer it either. I don't think any of us officially did, but I like our answers better. Any other last few comments you want to share?
I'm just finding it very challenging going forward for the young people. So many things are changing. I don't know. I'm very, 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 very concerned. What's going to happen to science? What's going to happen to America's leadership, America's allies, and education in general? I'm very concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's my last words.
No, I mean, I share that sentiment, and I talked to a lot of my colleagues. I don't know how this translates into education yet. I know it's going to have, I already know it has a deleterious, the cutting of grants and all of that, the elimination of programs is going to have an immensely deleterious effect on education. But I'm hoping like what Jason and I are trying to do will help to ameliorate some of that. We'll reach out to people who otherwise wouldn't have an opportunity to go to school and work really at a grassroots level. But architecture has always been thought of as a gentlemanly profession, right? It's still very kind of patriarchal in a very kind of more subtle way. And I have to say, I experienced much more sexism in architecture than I did when I was working in construction. So,
Sure.
And I agree with you, Joe. Construction was the most important thing I wanted to learn, especially as a female, because as you already know, there's often the conditions are ripe for contentious relationship between architects and builders. And so architects do need to understand construction to be able to speak the same language. But as a woman who then it was, they could be, even more dismissive to. I wanted to show them, one, that I could do the hard labor, that I wasn't just a pencil pusher, but also to be able to have those kind of conversations. And I tell you, I got much more respect from working with builders than I did from other architects. I come from, I think very similar to some of you, a very humble background. And so that's why I feel really strongly about being able to preserve this opportunity for people now, especially as education is really taking a hit, to ensure that we can find ways to educate people who would not otherwise have the resources to do that.
I'll add to that too, as someone who was in education as a student, realizing what was going wrong with architectural education, 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago already, but that it was so hypothetical from the real world in a field that used to be apprenticeship based. So the one good thing that I think can come for the architecture field from all of this is we're going to go back to, like you said, Lisa, that grassroots piece of we're going to have to get our hands on, pass down the information, through that experience again, as there's the tumultuous educational environment, which is one thing, but also just the disconnection from the field that has happened over the, past, I would say 2-3 decades, really made that drift happen even more so. So it'll be interesting to see, because Joe, I'm sure as you try to hire people, everyone is overqualified and underqualified at the same time.
Yeah.
I see that a lot. And yeah, thank you so much for this. This was a lot of fun. I enjoy it. I enjoy all the perspectives. Yeah.
And Lisa, thank you for everything you do. I really applaud you.
Thank you, Joe. I really appreciate your support and your words of encouragement all the time. And, doing this interview is going to help, because we want to reach out to other people and show them that there are ways to get into this field if that's what they want, that don't involve like the more conventional paths. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
have a good night, everyone.
Good night now.
Good night, everybody.
Bye. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Architects Off the Beaten Path, brought to you by the Pacific Academy of Building Design. This series is all about highlighting the incredible stories of architects who've taken a unique, interesting, non-traditional path into this profession and proven that there are many ways to make an impact in the built environment. We're just getting started. If you enjoyed this conversation, we'd love your input. Who should we interview next? What topics should we explore? Whether it's emerging voices, underrepresented paths, or bold design stories, we want to hear from you. You can send us your suggestions by emailing info@pabd.us or DM us on any of our social media platforms. Be sure to follow us to stay updated on new episodes, behind-the-scenes content, and future guests. You can find the Pacific Academy of Building Design, PABD, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And if you're part of an organization that believes in building a more inclusive future for the design professions, we're actively seeking sponsors to help expand this series. The Pacific Academy of Building Design is an alternative, affordable educational pathway for aspiring architects and designers. We're committed to reshaping architectural education to be more inclusive, practice-focused, and accessible, especially for those who don't see themselves represented in traditional academic spaces. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Architects Off the Beaten Path.